Okay, well, if you look in the Psalm 8, 4 through 6, it says this. What is man that God, you are mindful of him, the Son of Man, that you care for him? You made him, and you put everything under his feet. The most pressing theological question of our day is the question David asked some 3,000 years ago. What is man? And if you get that question wrong, you get so many things wrong. Is he an animal? Is he a machine? Is he primarily a social being? Is he primarily a sexual being? Or is he an economic being? Or is it more about being a free being? Or is he a vulnerable pawn in the universe? Or is he something more? Again, if you get this question wrong, you're going to get so many things wrong. What is man? If he's primarily an animal with no qualitative differences from a monkey or a dog, well, he'll probably act and be reacted to primarily in behavioral ways. Human motivation will be understood primarily as just biological drives, because he's just an animal. Behaviors will be seen, affected, and conditioned by simple rewards, basically positive reinforcement and punishments, negative reinforcements, because people would be no different than like Pavlov's dogs. You'd be a brutal beast at worst, a noble savage at best. That is if man's an animal. If man is primarily a machine, then he'll be seen primarily for what he can do, or what he can accomplish, or what he can perform, or what he can give. Employees will concern themselves only with meeting those necessary needs to keep workers functioning effectively in order to accomplish their tasks, because the goal is to get stuff done. Churches will hire pastors simply to perform their ministerial duties. Converts like you could be seen just as potential giving units to finance the church, because we're basically just machines. People are things. We're chess pieces, a means to an end, insignificant cogs in a wheel, robots in an assembly line, valued primarily for how useful you are. If man is primarily seen as a social being, then you'll be seen and valued primarily by your involvement in groups of people. If you isolate or don't interact socially, you'll be seen as less human. You won't be a human being because of some substance or fixed definable nature, but you'll be human because you have a network of connections, because you're primarily seen as social and relational. On the other hand, if man is seen primarily as a sexual being, and we're in a sexual revolution right now, then you'll be seen primarily driven by hormones and libido. Testosterone for men, estrogen for women, and your sexual energy, those will be seen as the driving forces of your life. It won't be God, it won't be your conscience, it won't be your rational, it'll be your sexually driven beings. I mean, come on, people. We of course act out and have hookups because we're sexual. People like Sigmund Freud, maybe back in the day, Dr. Ruth or Hugh Hefner or some sexual guru, they'll be the people that we listen to. Sexual experimentation, variety, freedom, and expression will be viewed as valuable, but things like sexual abstinence and monogamy, chastity, limits, and purity will be seen as archaic and ridiculous. On the other hand, if man is seen primarily as an economic being, primarily affected and motivated by economic forces, then all the material dimensions of life will be seen as most important. Adequate food and clothing and housing and those significant needs will be seen as what actually drives man. When a man achieves monetary satisfaction and provision, it's said that he'd be satisfied and fulfilled. This is the basic ideology, of course, of communism. But capitalists believe too that if you're rich enough or have financial freedom, then you'll be happy. And so many people think you're primarily an economic being. So if you can get the finances to work out, then everything will be just fine. Others see man as primarily a free being. So you're primarily defined by your ability to choose or express yourself. And therefore governments are seen as, and they're valued if they just create environments where you can choose what you want. Things like overregulation and paternalism will be exasperating. Education is just to inform you so you can make good choices. Just choose wisely, because you're the master of your fate. You are the captain of your soul. And so don't make excuses, don't blame, just choose wisely, because you're primarily just a free being. Others see man as primarily a pawn of the universe. Little more than a helpless victim at the mercy of forces in the world which control his destiny and have no real concern for him. You know, look, you're oppressed, people. There's nothing you can do. Bertrand Russell, Jean-Paul Sartre, these existential pessimistic thinkers want us to believe that you're just here because of blind forces, forces of chance, even political forces, and they're designed to crush you and into futility and despair and resignation. No wonder you're depressed. Life is meaningless and absurd. In fact, our last time together, we looked at a lot of Darwin's beliefs. My goal was to try to debunk Darwin and eviscerate his evolutionary thinking. And a lot of Darwinian thinking is based on this, chance. Just chance. You can't have a God, so, well, what would make everything happen? It just happened by chance. You know, chance used to be back in the day kind of a mathematical probability. If you put money in an account, there's a chance it'll gain some interest. If you move next door to that girl, there's a chance you'll meet her. There was this kind of mathematical probability thing. But now chance is way bigger than that. Chance is kind of anything could happen. But chance is nothing. Chance has no causal power. Chance can't make things happen. There's no chance can't produce anything. It's just hocus pocus. It's just really magical madness. It's irrational. It's ridiculous. It's incoherent, but it's what my alma mater UCLA teaches. I'm just like, okay, SC fans, they teach it there too. They teach it everywhere. Look, if there's a piano, there's got to be someone who made it. If there's a building, someone made it. If there's a universe, someone made it. But they say no, chance made it, because we can't have a God. And chance and God are mutually exclusive. Chance is not science. It's just silliness. It's ridiculous. I'll read you Nobel Prize winner biochemist George Wall's article on the origin of life. He wrote this back in 1954. It says, one has only to wait. Time itself will perform the miracles. Given so much time, the impossible becomes possible, the probable becomes probable, and the probable will virtually be certain. It's just double talk. It's just baseless babble, bull, and baloney. I can't believe he got a Nobel Prize for that nonsensical gibberish, but this is what is being taught today, this godless mumbo jumbo. This is like a heathen Hail Mary, you know, from a field on another state. It's just, self-creation is absurd. Chance is nothing. There's no such thing as chance. You ran into that girl because you lived next door to her and she lived next door to you, and you both happened to leave the house at the same time. Chance didn't make you run into each other. You ran into each other. But chance is given credit for all this craziness. It's like a syllable salad. Makes our vice president look smart. Anyways. So is man primarily an animal? I regress. That was so, will you pray for me? So is man an animal? Is he primarily a machine? Is he primarily a social being? Is he primarily an economic being, or a sexual being, or a free being, or a vulnerable pawn? Or is he something more? And if something more, we want to know what that is, because we certainly want to know what God says man is. And God says man is an image bearer. And an image bearer of a benevolent, loving God, who created us and gave us a unique place and a unique part in creation. And that's super important. Now, he's not the highest object in the world or the universe to be worshipped like God, but he's incredible and awesome and inspiring. And you all have great value because God has created you. You're fearfully and wonderfully made. You didn't just randomly show up. You're not a result of chance or chaos or a byproduct of some big bang. You're breathtaking and amazing. And as Psalm 100 verse 3 says, know that the Lord is God. It is he that made us, and we are his. We are his people, the sheep of his pasture. God's made us, and so you have incredible dignity and worth. And today we're in the book of Genesis, and we're in chapter 1, and we're on day 6 of creation. And we've seen that God created all these things. He creates the heavens and the earth and the plants and the moon and the stars and the sun and the animals and the fish and the bird. He set everything up for this beautiful, perfect home for now his really climax and crescendo of creation, which is man. And so here we are on day 6. Let's read our 6 verses together and we'll unpack them. Genesis chapter 1, starting in verse 26, we'll read through verse 31. Then God said, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, and over every living creature that moves on the ground. Then God said, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it, and they'll be yours for food. To all the beasts of the earth and all the birds of the sky and all the creatures that move along the ground, everything that has breath of life in it, I give every green plant for food. And it was so. And God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the 6th day. So creation now comes to a crescendo, comes to a climax. God has done everything he can to create a home for mankind. We see that creation is in ascending order, so he's building up more complex creations as we go. So man is going to be the climax of that. We see that prior to day 6, God just said, let there be light, and there was light. Let there be, but now he doesn't say, let there be. He says, let us make. So something's different. He spoke everything else into existence. Now there's some kind of creative act that's unique and different, because now all of a sudden we have an image bearer. Not made like the animals, not made like a plant, not made even like the angels. And he's given a unique assignment to rule and govern over the entire planet. And of course, Genesis 1 just gives us kind of the cliff notes. This is the trailer of the movie. When we get next week into Genesis chapter 2 and we start to unfold that chapter, there's even more detail as the Hebrew parallelism goes back and says, let me unpack what that creation is actually like, because he's going to talk about the dust of the ground and bringing in, breathing in the breath of life and giving us more details of how he did it. But here he's like, let me just tell you what I did make. I made man in my image, male and female. I made them, and I didn't just speak them into existence. I created them in a unique way. So let's unpack the verses. Verse 26. Then God said, let us, plural, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, Trinity, intra-Trinitarian dialogue here. This is uniplural Godhead speaking here. This is so different from what we had before. Let there be, and there was. Now it's let us. So this verse right here gives us a little insight into the Trinity, that God himself is having a conversation with himself. God is talking within the Godhead about this incredible new climax, which is quite different from everything else he's already created. Now, if you look through Scripture, you'll see there obviously were divine councils among the Trinity itself. Previously, I'll give you a few examples, like in 1 Peter 1, it says the Lamb had in the determination of these councils been slain before the foundation of the world. Well, if the Lamb was slain before the foundation of the world, that means that the Godhead had a dialogue prior to Christ dying in human time. That was already decided a long time ago. We see that in Revelation 17. We studied Revelation together, and it says the names of the redeemed had been written in the book of life before the foundation of the world. So before God even got there, there was a little triadic meeting about who would be in the book of life. So there's places in Scripture that say the Godhead has its own conferences. We see that in 2 Timothy 1:9, God called those who were to be saved by his grace before the world began. So here we're given insight that on the sixth day, there was a council within the Trinity where the Father, Son, and Spirit are saying to themselves, let us make Adam, man, a human being, in preposition, meaning according to our image and likeness, not physically, but relationally and spiritually and morally. Let's make a man according to the personality and dynamics of the Godhead, like in a Trinitarian nature, unlike the animals that exist before, just from command, let us make. Now, he says, as a divine counsel, someone that's actually in our very image and likeness, someone who has the aspects and attributes of ourselves. So as we kind of unpack, well, what is this image and likeness? Well, there's the physical likeness, like some of you are having babies and stuff, and when your kids grow up, you'll say, like, it's amazing, your kid, they so look like you, you know? And we see that, of course. We see an example is in Genesis 5. Adam fathered Seth, and it says Seth looked after his image in appearance, like like father and son. It's like, wow, you look like you go together. So there is something in the image and likeness, which is, there's something similar. There's a sonship, if you will, a friendliness. Now, God is not physical, of course, but there is a sense that this image bearing is part of like a royal task God is going to give man. We saw that in the Egyptian and Assyrian text in the day. If they ever used the words like image bearing, it was like a king was an image bearer of the kingdom. So he kind of was a royal figure. And so I think there is a royalty to man here too. So what does this image bearing include? Well, it includes moral consciousness. Plants don't have that. Animals don't have that. You have the faculty, the ability, not taught here in Genesis 1. You have to unpack it in other verses, but what does it actually mean? Like as you understand the scriptures, what does an image bearer mean? Well, it means you have a moral conscience. You know right from wrong, good from evil. Romans 2 says it is written on your hearts and your conscience bears witness. Why? Because you're an image bearer. You don't have to tell someone murder is wrong. They would have something inside them that would say, yeah, you could take that person out, and they'd go, really? What are the laws here? Like, are you sure? It's like, that doesn't seem right. No, it doesn't seem right because God's done something in man that gives him a moral conscience. And if it doesn't seem off to them, then something's been severed in their conscience. And we do have people like that because we live in a fallen world. But image bearing has to do with moral consciousness. It has the ability you have the ability to think abstractly because you're an image bearer. In other words, you can be logical and reasonable. You have the ability to appreciate beauty and emotion. Image bearing means you have the ability to use language. You can communicate relationally. You can verbalize needs. You can understand and express difficult abstract concepts. I remember at UCLA, I was a comm major, and I had a class there where we had to do an assignment, 1 page, which is hard to do, a 1-page report where you have to, and the assignment was the origin of language. I said, well, that's super easy. I mean, God created it. He gave it to Adam. He started with language, you know. I got an F. But anyway, so I was fine with that. I protested it. Our teacher was French, you know, from France, you know, so that was super woke and feng shui back in the 80s. But I'm just like, well, why do you want to mark me down just because you think differently? Like, where do you think that, well, the origin of language, man, was good. You know, some cave dude that like couldn't buy a syllable for the life of him needed to go to Jeopardy, you know, get on Jeopardy. I'll take a vowel. Something. I don't know. I mean, but it's like the image bearer means that God gave you language. Man started with language. And remember we were talking about God creates things and he created things already mature. Remember evolutionists are like, well, if we date something, you know, it'd be billions and zillions of years. Yeah, but God created a mature universe already. He didn't create puppies. He created a dog. Already full grown. What came first, the chicken or the egg? You know the answer, right? Not the egg. He started with a mature chicken. Everything he created was mature. So man had language and moral capacity. And he was intelligent and rational. He was in a cave, man. For goodness sakes. That was me scratching in the cave, you know. Man can certainly create tools, and he can build structures and invent machines and write music and play instruments and paint paintings and innovate and pioneer and create from the beginning because he's an image bearer. And God's like that. And he can worship. He has the ability to be preoccupied, to adore, to serve, and to sacrifice for something. He has the ability to love. He has a heart that was given to him. And he's an image bearer, so he has affect and emotion and feeling. And he can love God and people. He doesn't have to grow into that. It was given that way. And when you see even little children, it's super cool, right? To just see, like, they typically like to cling and hold and love. And you put two babies together, it's so cute to see them like, wow, like, who taught them that? Like, who taught them that you're supposed to go up and kiss each other and love each other and tackle each other? And but they also push each other and then kick each other. And so it's like, okay, so they are fallen babies in a fallen world born in sin. So they know how to do that too, but it's because they have the capacity to attach. They have a relational capacity. It's all built into the image of God. So mankind is created in the image of God. He has a spirit. We'll learn more about that in Genesis 2. He has a body. He is a soul, an image-bearing soul. And that all reflects who God is. Even though God is not contained by the physical, he creates man's body and his being in a way that's fitting for God. One writer said, God designed and formed man's body to enable it to function physically in ways in which he himself, God himself, could function even without a body. Super interesting, right? So God can see, Genesis 16:13 or Proverbs 15:3, the eyes of the Lord are in every place, keep watching on the evil and the good. God may not have physical eyes, but God can see. God can hear, Psalm 94:9, 1 John 5:14. This is the confidence we have towards him, that if we ask anything according to his will, he hears us. Whether he has physical ears or not, God hears. And he created a body for us that reflects who he is so we can hear. And God can smell. And God can touch. Genesis 32:32 touches Jacob's hip and doesn't walk as well as a result. God can speak. 2 Peter 1:18. God can laugh. Psalm 2:4. I mean, God has all these amazing attributes, even though he's a spirit primarily, but we're to worship him in spirit and in truth. But we have a physical body created in the image of God that reflects what God is like, even though he's not confined to physicality. Though when God does show up on the planet, he does come physically. So when we see in like Genesis, when you see that God appears, like in Genesis 18:1 and 2, we call that a theophany, theos, from God. He appears in a physical, man-like form, what we call a theophany. So when God does choose to be incarnated, he does take on a human body that reflects who he is. So the body he made for us is the body he would want to assume himself. And of course, Jesus does come in human flesh 2,000 years ago. And when he came as God in physical form, that was obviously a body God designed for Jesus before the foundations of the world. So the body he created us was a body he knew he could encapsulate, that he could actually occupy. It would be a body that actually God would like to be in because it would reflect what he is, a seeing, hearing, smelling, loving, touching, embracing kind of God. So he created a body for man in his image that would hold these capacities, these unique attributes that our God would want. Am I getting too deep? Are you tracking with that? It's kind of cool though, right? It's cool. Like God is not limited to the physicality, but he gave us bodies that tell us a lot about God. That God is an upright God. He's not, scraping his knuckles on the ground. He created us upright, able to gaze, able to make eye contact. Those are all attributes about God. God sees, he gets us. He feels like our body, even alone, even though he's not limited to it, is a body design that he would want to be in and does come in. And he created us in that amazing image. And when he does appear, he comes in the appearance of a man. And by the way, angels do too. You might remember in Acts 1, Jesus says, go and make disciples of all the nations. The Gospels end with that. But then Acts 1 records Jesus saying, you are going to receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you and be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, and the uttermost parts of the world. And then he ascends. And the disciples are just awestruck. They're just watching him like ascend. He had already died, been buried, rose again, stayed 40 days, and now he ascends. And it says there were two men standing there in white robes. Who were those? Those are angels, but they appeared as men. So even angels, like God, when they actually inhabit space on our planet, they appear as men. And we were created in that very image, which is super cool. So we move on in the text, and it says, so that God created man in his own image, so that they may rule or govern or master or have dominion over the fish of the sea and the birds of the sky, over the livestock, all the wild animals, over all the creatures that move on the ground. So man is created to rule, to govern. You're a ruler, you're a governor. You've been given a lot of authority. God delegated his creation to you and to me, which is super amazing. Rada, this Hebrew word used 22 times in scripture, is used of a master over a hired servant, or an administrator over an employee, or a king over his subjects, over a ruler over a nation, or a shepherd over a flock. So every time it's used, it's a steward of someone who's over something, like a leader, a ruler, a governor, someone who's adjudicating and overseeing. That's you. You're the CEO of your own life. You have authority. You have power. You have ability to enact things, build a business, start a family. Go for it. I know it's a fallen world and we all have limits, and it's a little bit broken here, but the image of God is not gone. It's a little distorted. I remember when Sue and I first went to Athens together. It was super fun to take her up on the Acropolis, which is on the top. There's the Parthenon. Have any of you been to the Parthenon, or you've maybe seen pictures of that huge Greek edifice? Well, it's rubble now, right? But it's still so incredible. It's okay, this is like a ruined, not occupied old temple. But it was so huge and massive, impressive. And even though some of the columns had fallen, and you could see the broken pieces, it was still breathtaking. You can only imagine in its glory what it was like, but it's the image of the Parthenon is still one of the most impressive things I've ever seen. You're impressive, even though we're broken and sinful and distorted and a little bit perverted and off. What still remains of the image of God is just unbelievable. It's really amazing what people can do, even in our fallen condition. And we haven't lost the glory. Human beings can be so inspiring. Yes, they can be so cruel too, but they can rule with benevolence and kindness, and they can do charitable things, and they can be super cool. Anyways, verse 27, so God created bara, mankind, Adam, in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. Now, this is super cool because this is kind of a little bit of section of poetry. The letter chi, which stands for Christ, looks like a modern day X for us. It looks like an X, but it's the Greek letter chi. This is in the chiastic formation, which means it's, how do you say it? It says one thing and then it reverses it. So you have both sides coming. It's super poetic and a beautiful way to say it. Do you see that here in the text? So he created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. See how they just kind of did that? By the way, every time you take a vow in a wedding, you'll see that the pastor, if he knows what he's doing, though I've seen a lot of bizarre stuff these days, he'll have them move into the chiastic formation, which is where the bride and the groom actually face each other right? And they're supposed to like give the bouquet away, though nowadays they come up and they give their bouquet away and they kind of stand looking at each other the whole time. It's like, no, that's not a proper way. Like you should be looking forward at your guest or together. But when it's like, are you ready for the vow? You ready? With witnesses? Okay, now the chiastic formation, which is now they come together, face each other, and where's the pastor goes right in the middle between them, and they form a cross. Historically, it's always been super important. And when I see it messed up at a wedding, my wife just says, don't say anything. But I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't. Anyways, you have a little chiastic phrase here. God created mankind in his image. In the image of God, he created them. I love that. Anyways, the chiastic formation is just a beautiful way of saying this is a sacred thing. This is holy. Human life is sacred. It's like this formation would only be given to something super dignified. So it's like, wow, that's like highlighting in your notes or something, or underlining something. Like, wow, that must be important. Yeah, that is. This is super important, how this is phrased here. And how did he create them? Well, as man and maiden, as a binary being, a dynamic dyad. He created them zakar, nekeba, male and female. He created them. He created them ha-adam. In other words, human beings are made as distinct sexual persons. This is not an accident of nature. It's not simply a biological phenomenon. This is intended as an intentional gift from God to show that there are distinctions in sexuality that actually reflect the imago Dei, the image of God. And unisexuality is a perversion, diminishing or confusing any sexual identity is a complete perversion for God. This passage alone, I don't know how we got so off in the 21st century, but there are two sexes and only two sexes. I did not say two genders. That's also confusion. Two objective sexes that express themselves in two subjective genders. In other words, you have a gender role that flows from your sexuality, but the sex is basic because you have two different anatomies with two different genitalia and two different forms of plumbing, if you will, because they have two different chromosome DNA sets. So I don't want to get too technical here, it's not my forte, but the male has two of his 46 chromosomes. The 23rd pair is an XY pair, and the female, the 23rd pair, is an XX pair. So they don't complete each other, though sometimes I hear that in a wedding too, and I'm like, no! No, you need 100% man with 100% woman to get 100% couple. Well, he's just kind of 50%. He's got a lot of issues. She's kind of 50%. You got a lot of issues. It's like, okay, but relationships multiply, and a half times a half is what? It's a quarter. That's a train wreck, people. Marriage is not going to last. You need a whole person times a whole person gives you the two shall become one. So you want a whole enough, not a perfect guy, but a whole enough guy with a whole enough gal, and together they become one because they complement each other. They don't complete each other. 50-50 would be great if we're adding, but we're not. We're multiplying. I know. Anyways, I don't know how we got off, but I just don't want to miss this, right? So human beings have value. And these two are going to complement each other in their distinctiveness. And the order, by the way, is important, male and female, because as we see in Genesis 2, the male is created first, and the female is not created from the dust of the ground, but is created from his what? His rib. So he's going to be called the head, and then when they both sin and screw up, God's going to call Adam, not Eve, to account. That is why today, still in a wedding, though even this is changing, the woman takes the man's last name. That's been going on since Genesis 1. Because there's an order to the universe. Doesn't mean he's better. They're both created in the image of God, both with value and dignity. They're both super important. And they have different roles. And I know men want to get pregnant these days, but dude, come on. Go back to chapter 1. Anyways, God blessed them, verse 28. It says he blesses them, which is super cool. And then said to them, this may not have caught you, but it caught me this week. Like, what? God's been commanding, let there be, let there be, let there be. Now he says to them. He doesn't command them. He doesn't like, okay, listen up. I got an assignment for you. He talks to them. This emphasizes how personal this is. God is such a relational God with even Adam and Eve here. He says to them, be fruitful. In other words, have a lot of kids and increase, grow, multiply in number, and fill the earth. That's a lot of kids, which we see, by the way, in Genesis 5, 9, 11, 25, 36, and 46. Silent testimony to the fulfillment of this calling because they continue to do it. This verse alone just tells us that sex and sexuality is not just for procreation or just recreation, but procreation. It's not just for celebration, it's for propagation. He tells them, he says to them, he converses with them, I want you to have a lot of children. And again, this is so odd today that we have to say this, but we're not doing this well. We, as a Protestant, God-fearing, Bible-believing people are not doing this well. Of course, everyone else is doing it worse in many ways, but we're not doing our job, unfortunately. Let alone subdue it, kabats, which means to take charge of it. So to fill the earth is the first command given to man in Scripture. In the Bible, in the Torah, in the Pentateuch, it means that the world's continuity is in danger if you don't fulfill this first command. It's so obvious, and it means that God created a planet that would hold a lot of people. And Europeans today have not fulfilled this mandate. In Japan, it's catastrophic. We're not doing that great either, but this is a radical command. It may seem obvious, of course, because many of us have heard this command or this cultural mandate to fill the earth. But if you go back when this was written and Moses recorded this revelation for us, the Gilgamesh epic was the most popular ancient word of the day, and it said the greatest problem for mankind was overpopulation. That was back in Moses' day. That's still the crazy lie that people are sharing today, that there's too many people on the planet, that we got to get rid of people. And there's a lot of people who are intentionally trying to get rid of people today. They're supporting the abortion agenda, crazy vaccine, all kinds of things that they think will eliminate people because they think the world's too overpopulated. You only have to hop on a plane at LAX and fly anywhere. You will fly over more land, wherever you're flying to, you're going to go. There's ample room here, people. But we aren't obeying it. But now, why do I mention the Gilgamesh epic? It's just because this revelation comes from Moses, who says this statement is a clear rejection of the pagan thinking of the day. Back then, God specifically says, no. I don't know what you've heard from Mesopotamian mythology. You need to fill the earth. And the Israelites did it. In fact, when they were down in captivity under Pharaoh in Egypt, you remember Pharaoh was a little bit nervous. Why? They were having a lot of kids, and he thought, well, they might overpower us. Yeah, they were actually doing it. But here, disastrously, since World War II, certainly accelerated in the 60s, the demonic doctrine of ZPG, zero population growth here in the West, has taken hold. And now, if you have 4 or more children, you have a huge family. 4 or 5. And the only people that are doing that are people that are, devout Roman Catholics, Orthodox Jews, maybe faithful Mormons, or evangelical Christians. That's it. The irreligious people are not having children. Maybe 1, maybe 2. And of course, my friends, again, my poor wife, she's just like, Dave, don't say anything. I have to say something. They're like, we're thinking of only having 1 or 2. I'm like, no, you can't do that. That's not, like, why would you disobey God? They're like, what? I'm like, you can't multiply by just replacing yourself. 2 kids is replacing yourself. That's it. You haven't even done the first mandate of Scripture, which is, okay, don't get me going. I don't need to lose any more friends. I have no friends. So come on. But then again, when I talk to people, they actually like, I've never heard this. Honestly, they're like, I've never heard this. We just thought, how many kids can we afford? And most people have 1 or 2 kids. We're just like, it wasn't, they weren't trying to disobey God. They just were like, they've never been taught, like, you're supposed to have like a dozen if you can, it's like, what?
A dozen?
When I was in the Soviet Union back in the 80s, I was a missionary there, so was Sue for a while. And I would meet some people that were believers in the underground Christian church there. And if you told them that, if we just told them we have 5 kids, they would be like, that's it? Why? Because they have 12, 17, 19, 11. Look at our founding forefathers in our country. Just go back to Washington, Adams, all those guys. You think they had 1 or 2? No. Who's going to run our plantations, people? We got to have kids, right? You need the workers, you need the family unit, you need to multiply. Anyways, we won't go there. We don't have time. The point is, we're not obeying this mandate anymore, but it's still there in Genesis 1. So let's have more kids. If you know anyone who's having kids, keep going. Keep going. So it says, fill the earth. It also says, by the way, subdue the earth, subdue it. This is a military term. It was used of like subduing a slave or physical abuse and assault in Esther 7, or treading sins underfoot, as Zechariah 9, or a military subjecting the population of a city, Numbers 32, Joshua 18. It had to do with violence and kind of a display of force. So it's not only like fill the earth, but like subdue it. And I don't totally know why it says subdue it. So first, forcefully, we haven't had the fall yet of man. That comes up in Genesis 3. But we do have the fall of Satan. Remember how we talked about that there's formless and void, and maybe something cuckoo's going on and stuff. So I think this is probably a mandate that says, 1, fill the earth, but be sharp. There's evil around. And man hasn't become evil yet, but Satan has fallen, and so have a third of the angels. They've been treasonous. So there is a sense of you better you're going to have to take the cultural mandate seriously. There is going to be some opposition, even though you haven't sinned yet. Of course, we'll create our own opposition. But I do think this has a sense of you need some grit and gumption. So the cultural mandate is about having kids, filling the earth. It is also, by the way, about science and technology and research and development and theory and application and study and practice. In other words, take over the world, go for it. I created a lot of stuff here. Go figure it out. Have fun, dig around, find minerals, make things, build cities. It's all in there. And rule over the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, over the living creatures that move on the ground. Be a caretaker, be a steward, be a worker, be thoughtful and thrifty, respectful and resourceful, caring and conserving. But you're a king of creation. You're to rule, you're to govern. And if you don't rule nature, let me be honest with you, nature will rule you. And that's what you see in pagan countries. They think nature rules, and our own country is getting weird. It's one thing to steward the planet; it's another to make the whales more important than children. or saving seals when we're aborting kids. It's super cuckoo. So yes, man is to progress and find cures and develop life-saving medicines and conquer smallpox and polio, but we're not to romanticize nature. We're to rule it. And the problem is not overpopulation or the depletion of the ozone layer or greenhouse gases or ocean dead zones or melting polar ice caps or the sea levels rising or the loss of biodiversity or pollution in the air and the water or deforestation or climate change. That's not how the world's going to go down. It's all crazy. There's like 1,000 different lies, doomsday scenarios in my lifetime and yours that are just crazy. I'm all for picking up trash and helping with roadside litter and cleaning up oil spills and monitoring car exhaust and periodically burning underbrush to protect forests and harvesting trees where needed. Like, I'm all for like stewarding the planet, but this stuff is crazy. We're not going to kill ourselves by environmental stuff or climate change. We already saw in Revelation, the world's going to end because Christ is going to come back and the world's going to be destroyed by him, not by us. There's no way you can destroy this world. He's made it so, the ecosystems and how he's done, like we could be good stewards, but there's no way man's going to ruin it. That's all just a myth to try to do something else. I won't get into it. Verse 29, we got to get through this. Then God said, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the earth, every tree that has fruit with seed in it, and they will be yours for what? Food. So if God creates you, he's going to preserve you. The things that God brings into life, he's like, I'm going to give you sustenance. I'm going to give you something that will nourish you. I'm going to give you food, meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks. Like, I'm going to give you all this great stuff. And it's for you, by the way. That, by the way, even when Moses recorded this, was not the thoughts of the day. The thoughts of the day is food was for the gods. When I was in Thailand, I was shocked. Here's a country they're practically starving in many places there. And you go to gas stations, there's all these little offerings to the gods. Food, or slices of oranges, put out. All over the world, there's people that are making food offerings to the gods because the gods apparently are hungry or they need, it's like, no, the food is for you. God's like, this is so radical. God's like, I don't need food. I don't need food. The food is for you. But the pagans don't even get this. All over the world. You go to India, they have the sacred what? Sacred cows. They have no meat or protein in the entire nation, but they got cows roaming around everywhere and you can't do a thing about it. It's just... Verse 30. And to all the beasts of the earth and all the birds of the sky and all the creatures that move along, everything that has breath on it, I give every green plant for food, and it was so. God says, look, I'll feed you. Verse 31, let's finish out. Got to finish out. God saw all that he made, everything he created, and behold, wow, it was very good, like exceedingly excellent. God is now validating his complete creation here with like a thumbs up, like day 6, killed it. Yeah, no, that's not a good theological term. Crushed it. And there was evening and there was morning, the 6th day. And man's number is 6. God's number is 7. And the Antichrist will come with the number 666 because he'll be like the demonic Trinitarian view of man. So today we tried to tackle what is man. I think I derailed a few times there, but is he an animal? Is he a machine? Is he primarily a social being? Is he primarily a sexual being or an economic being or a free being or a vulnerable pawn in the universe? Or no, he's none of those. No, he's not. He's an image bearer of a loving, benevolent God. He's awesome and very impressive. And he created mankind in his own image. So he's got a moral conscience. He's got a heart. He's relational. He's got language. I mean, he's super sophisticated. He can think abstractly. He's amazing. So all people have dignity and value. Everyone does. And we should treat people as such. And Washington, D.C. better figure this out. Like, I don't care if you have different views, red, blue, whatever. People have dignity, and they should be treated with dignity and maturity. And God said, I made them male and female. This is not confusing to God. Those sexual distinctions are very, very important to God's imago Dei. Why? Because you are not a God. So you're not everything. I remember a time when I was a young man, and there was a lot of research out on, I needed to get in touch with the feminine inside myself. It's like, no, there's no feminine inside myself. No, there's maybe softer Dave and harder Dave. And, I kind of felt like I understood what they were trying to get at. But if I have the feminine in myself, I don't need Sue or any of the rest of you ladies. Like, I can be self-autonomous. I can be my own God. I can rule all by myself. And women, you don't need to get in touch with your masculine side. You don't have one. You have a harder side, maybe a more aggressive side, a more assertive side, a more comfortable with power side, whatever. You can fill that in. That's fair. But no, that's an attempt to make you think you have everything you need. No, built into the Imago Dei was the binary limitation that you don't have everything. Even though you're created in the image of God and you reflect him and you're an incredible being, no, you're not God. You don't have everything. You need the not you. You need the other. He created a dynamic dyad. And we need to keep those. And trying to distort that with hair, fashion, style, anything that kind of distorts those distinctions is evil to God. You're not a pawn, you're a prince. You're not a cog, you're a king. A creation of God, an image bearer, a steward, a son, beloved. Amen?
Amen.